I'm Rear Admiral Doug Morton, the new commander of NAVFAC Atlantic. I'd like to welcome you to the NAVFAC Atlantic Industry Forum. This is our 6th Atlantic Industry Forum. This is the first time, though, we've done this by webinar. Somewhat of a cost-cutting measure, but also to see how this works to get as many people as possible to tune in and understand what the programs that NAVFAC Atlantic will have over the next fiscal year. Again, I appreciate you turning in to what we're doing here today. We're going to share all the information we can with you concerning our programs across our organization. We have 5 broadcast days over the next 2 weeks, and during those periods of time, you'll hear from our organization end to end, whether it's our business and support line leaders here in Norfolk or our field commanders from across the organization. We have 7 field commanders that will be online with you, talking real estate development, architecture and engineering services, public works service delivery, which is a big part of our business, and of course our construction program. We're going to take questions and answers during the webinar, and they'll be taken by someone monitoring the computer here. So your question specifically may not be the one that gets answered while the presenter is online. But we'll do our best to take all those questions, consolidate them, and then post them up on our web when the last presentation is done next week. Again, I'll be followed by Ed Gallagher from Capital Improvements Business Line, and that'll be the first opportunity for you to pose your questions to the command. Again, we welcome everybody's feedback. What we typically get in our industry forums at the Virginia Beach Convention Center, 700, 1,000 people. We have hundreds online right now, and I'm sure that'll ebb and flow during the course of the next 2 weeks. But that interaction that we have in person, face-to-face, we know we're going to miss that to some degree. And if many of you are like me, computers are not necessarily my best friend, but a friend I must have. So use it the best you can. We'll do what we can to make sure we're interactive with you during the course of the presentations. And we might find ourselves back at Virginia Beach Convention Center next year to carry on the forum. So with that, I'll go into a discussion about our command. I know some of you are quite familiar with us, but others may be new, so I'll go through the basics here. Naval Facilities Engineering Command, of which Atlantic is a component, is a global engineering and acquisition organization which delivers its products and services through about 100 locations across the globe, mostly through our public works departments and our officers in charge of construction. We did about $12 billion of workload last year, and we see about the same number for this coming year. We're also a DoD construction agent, sharing that role with the Army Corps of Engineers. So that means we split the geographic plane of the world between the 2 commands. At NAVFAC Atlantic, we have 88 field offices that are commanded by 7 different engineering field commands. Again, our workload within NAVFAC Atlantic projected for 13 is about $9 billion. We find ourselves really in a command and control function. We're an enabler for the delivery of these products and services. We have a fiscal responsibility here at NAVFAC Atlantic to help manage those resources across the organization. We provide detailed fleet support to the U.S. Fleet Forces Command, and again, we are a technical authority for NAVFAC. On this slide, you'll see the COs of the 7 field engineering commands and the geographic laydown of them across the United States and Europe, Africa, and Southwest Asia. One of those people noted there on the slide that says John Corca is NAVFAC Mid-Atlantic. John has taken over Mid-Atlantic this Friday, and he'll be the one that briefs you all next week as Mark Livinati moves on after 2 years to NAVFAC headquarters. Again, we're going to give you the 13 program in as much detail as we can, but no further. The reason we don't give you a further view of the program in specific is because it's the President's budget, and that comes out annually, and so we don't get ahead of the President. We present to you what we have firmly in place in our program for the next year. So that's what you're going to see. We'll give you a sense of some look aheads and trends, things we think are important, but I encourage you just to pay attention to how the Department of Defense is set up and what the focuses are. You've seen the new National Defense Strategy shifting toward the Pacific. There's also a strategic laydown that is shifting some of the resources. So I just encourage you to stay abreast of what the department's doing, and you'll get a good sense of how we're going to follow that with the actual program in place. Again, the next slide I want to talk to is the program of record. I'm not sure I have that up yet. Let's go to that. I don't see the sand chart. Keep going. Okay, we'll just come back to that when I see the sand chart. Let me talk quickly about the command's focus areas then. This is live TV, folks. Again, I'm concerned about stewardship of resources. So you as a taxpayer and business people have entrusted us with billions of dollars of set of resources, and we've got to make sure that that money is well spent. So to do that, we're really talking about full and open competition. And that's really our focus in how we operate here. So that includes advocacy for small businesses. And those of you who are small businesses, you might say it's difficult to get in, but we've done $3 billion in fiscal year 12 in awards to small businesses. So $3 billion, that's with a B. There's a lot of work there for small businesses, and we have organizations across NAVFAC Atlantic and our field commands that can assist you in learning how to do business with NAVFAC. Also want people to go fast and go smart. Our supported commanders rely on the facilities that we provide to them and the improvements we make for them, and they expect things to happen quickly. We're looking for best value, and we're also looking for people to be safe. And if you've known me for a while, you've heard me talk about safety in many different forums. You've also seen our Orange Safety Book. All of you in government have it, and some of you in contractor circles have also seen this. We hold that as probably the most difficult thing that we do in our business, keeping a job site safe with a myriad of people and pieces of equipment and schedule, focus. Zero mishaps is our goal, and we've never gotten there, but it's still our goal. We don't expect anyone to be injured on our job sites. So we're going to hold you strictly accountable to that. We're going to ask that you use operational risk management like we use within NAVFAC. And we're also going to ask you to pay very close attention to the gap between the prime contractor and the subs. Our experience is that there's a drop-off pretty quickly between the way that our prime contractors manage job sites and the way our subs behave in line. So we're asking you to close that gap between performance between the prime and the sub. Let's talk quickly about the business and support lines. You're going to get overviews from all of our business and support line managers from NAVFAC Atlantic here the next day. Again, follow me as Ed Gallagher from Capital Improvements. You'll also hear from environmental, from acquisition, public works, and from our small business expert as well. Again, there's a couple things we're going to point out. I ask you to think, listen closely to the discussion on total ownership cost. There's a shift in the way the department is looking at total ownership cost as a part of the contract proposals. Also, the source selection process has changed some, and Patty Callahan will talk to you about that. And again, the focus on energy is steady. It is also right with a lot of discussion about how to best get a return on the investments we're making in energy areas. So again, pay attention to what we're going to talk to there. Partnerships. The slide up on the screen now is partnerships. I'm catching up. I don't take the word partnership lightly, and I want to make sure that you understand that our partnership is not one that's exactly equal. We're the general partner, and you are a partner in the work, but we're going to call the shots. We're going to do everything we can to treat you all as our contractors fairly. Our decisions are going to be based on facts, and they're going to be based on the facts at hand. So you have the opportunity to bring to us issues you think are important, and we'll bear them out. Again, during the course of the webinar today, we're going to limit some of the traditional interaction, but again, please take time to use the Q&A feature that is embedded in the on the site that you see. We understand the importance of the ability to get together and discuss in an open forum. Myself personally, if you'd like to visit me here at NAVFAC Atlantic, or if you'd like to visit our field commands, we take all comers. If you want to come take a visit here at LANT, just please give us a call, and I'll be happy to sit with you, as will our business and support lines. Again, welcoming your comments and questions. We're going to post them all at the end of the webinar. And again, this is an experiment for us to see how this goes. Our business and support lines are up next. And again, over the next couple of days, you'll hear from different field engineering commands with programs very specific to their areas of responsibility. Again, thanks for joining us. Again, several hundred people are on their line with you. I know you can't see them. I can't either. So this is a little bit odd. But again, I look forward to working with you over the next couple of years while I'm at Lant. And again, any questions, please drop them in the Q&A box, and we'll do our best to answer. Again, thanks for joining us.
Good day. My name is Ed Gallagher. I am the Chief Engineer and Capital Improvements Business Line Manager at NAVFAC Atlantic. Here today to talk a little bit about the Capital Improvements Business Line. In Capital Improvements, we have primarily two main products and services, that being engineering and design and construction. In engineering and design, we have primarily looking at providing design build or design bid build documents for construction. With that, in the design build arena, we put together design build RFPs. In the design bid build arena, they're full plans and specs. In either case, we do that through in-house forces or with our A&E contract partners. We also do studies, both with our A&Es and in-house. We do that for ATFB, anti-terrorism and force protection, fire protection, utilities, and condition pavement surveys. All of these documents are prepared electronically and put out in FedBiz Ops for solicitation. In our construction arena, we typically provide construction management services. We also provide quality assurance on those. We don't do any of the construction ourselves. We rely on our contractor partners for that. Contractor partners provide the quality control on our job sites. They are also responsible for maintaining safety on the sites. I want to congratulate our contractor partners on great safety. We have been an industry leader in that regard. Our safety numbers are much better than the regular industry standards. In addition to these two products and services at the NAVFAC Atlantic site, we have resident with us the NAVFAC Criteria Office. The members of the Criteria Office are responsible for all the criteria that the Navy provides. Most of this criteria is also DoD-wide. It's tri-service, working with our Air Force and Army partners. So we have a number of technical experts here at the site. We also rely on technical expertise across all of NAVFAC, both at our ESC site, the Engineering Service Center, and then at many of our other sites where we have expertise resident in our component commands. The FEC commanders who will be talking to you over the next couple of weeks, the COs, will be talking about their specific workload. However, we do provide workload forecasts on the NAVFAC portal. MILCON forecast has been provided for the last 2.5 years on the portal, and that website is located on the screen, as you can see. In addition to that, we are investigating providing the CNIC special project workload as well. That forecast is still under development, but we hope to have it posted at the same location sometime in the near future. Now I'd like to talk about just several CI initiatives that we have ongoing. First of these is building information management. Many of you out there know this more as building information modeling, BIM. However, at NAVFAC, what we've decided to do is take a more holistic view of this new tool and not stop with just the 3D modeling, but move on into something a little bit more rich that would entail the entire life cycle of the facility. BIM does have 6 dimensions available in it, and many of you, I think, are probably very attuned to that. The first 3 are your dimensions of space, and then there's cost, scheduling, and then the 6th dimension is one of facility management. That's the one where we, being the facility managers for the Navy and Marine Corps, intend to try and draw in that part of BIM that maybe is not being fully used out in the industry. As we try and do this, we're finding a number of problems, as you might guess. We have a headquarters team that is looking into this. They're taking a look at facility lifecycle management. One of the problems that we're really running into is one of storage. BIM is a storage hog, creates a lot of data. Very difficult to find places to store all of this within our Navy and Marine Corps computer systems. We currently have three pilot projects that are planned. One is ongoing at our Mid-Atlantic component. 2 more are envisioned but haven't been started, one at Southeast and one at Southwest. We have some limited anecdotal evidence of instances where contractors and A&Es have come to us on a design build project and said, hey, we want to use BIM as we develop this, and we've allowed them to do so. Those have met with varying degrees of success and also difficulty. So as we look into this new capability for us, I think a couple of things that are very evident. One, NAVFAC is taking a very slow turn on this. We're not rushing out trying to get ahead of any curve here, but rather what we'd like to do is see our industry partners learn a little bit about it and tell us something. So we're slow rolling it, working a little bit with our Corps of Engineer partners who I think are also doing the same thing. Second item here is the Energy Technology Clearinghouse. As you all know, energy is a huge buzzword around all of the economy these days. The same for the NAVFAC. In NAVFAC, we're also taking a look at energy and what we can do with it to decrease the load for our Navy and Marine Corps customers. As part of this, we have created a NAVFAC clearinghouse for proven technologies, and the key in that is the word proven. We're not putting stuff up there that is kind of developmental. These have to be technologies that are out there in business, are out there in the world, and working well, and have already a proven track record. We have Navy personnel who are taking a look at these technologies and deciding which ones we think we want to put forward. After they're put up on the clearinghouse, they're available for our internal Navy and Marine Corps designers to use as we decide on projects as they come up. Also would be available for any of our A&E partners, but this is a private site. This is not available on the public site. Under development also is a DoD clearinghouse. This is a lot further in its infancy than the NAVFAC clearinghouse. The DoD clearinghouse is envisioned to be a public clearinghouse. Not quite sure where it will reside at this point. We're working together with Air Force and Army to put this thing together, trying to get the Army to pretty much take the lead. The Army has research laboratories, a lot of which are doing the actual research on some of these technologies. And what we'd really like to kind of see is for them to kind of take the clearinghouse and kind of run it for DoD. I would envision that anything in this regard is probably at least a year out, maybe longer. So don't expect anything quickly in this regard. The third topic that I want to bring up and talk about today is construction management system. Those of you that have worked for NAVFAC in the past know that in the past we had something called WebCM that was both available to the contractor and to the Navy. It was the way of passing correspondence and tracking it and saving it. Correspondence in the term of letters, but also submittals, shop drawings, and the like. For whatever reason, that system did not work as well as we would have envisioned, and we had to stop using it. Since then, we've tried at least one other available topic or one other type of system that didn't work out very well. So what we thought about is instead we're going to go out to the private sector, and that's what we're doing here. We've already put out solicitation of interest, did that back in July, and it was only asking for some information from the private sector on what they thought might be good ideas related to a construction management system that would exist outside of the Navy firewall. So we've gotten that information back, and right now we're in the process of putting together a formal RFP, which will go out sometime in September. We will be asking for proposals from the private sector for managing this system, again, outside of the Navy firewall, using the cloud computing technology that's available in the private sector. Our goal is to have a selection made in early 2013. Many of us think that that's a pretty aggressive schedule, so don't be surprised if that slides a little bit further back into the year. The fourth topic that I'd like to talk about here today is consistency of products that we provide. We've been working very hard over the past 5 or 6 years to develop consistent products and services. Up there, you'll see that there's a couple of examples, things that we've been working on. Our design build RFP templates, which are available on the whole building design guide, contain a standard 6-part format. They should be being used on all of our design build RFPs. For those of you in industry, if you see deviations from that, I would appreciate a phone call or an email to that regard so that we can take a look at it. Now, there's certainly reasons for deviating from a standard, but we're truly trying to do is to make sure that what you guys see in the solicitations are standard, so you know where to look for things and that there aren't any surprises for you. So if you see things that don't make sense to you, please let me know. We've also made a very strong push towards towards the use of industry standards in all of our criteria and specifications. This isn't a new push. It's been going on for at least a decade. I think for the most part, we've almost eliminated completely all mil specs and have gone almost entirely to industry standards. All of our criteria and specifications are available on the whole building design guide website. It's got a wealth of information there. Anybody that hasn't done business with NAVFAC in the past, I'd encourage you to go there and take a look at the type of criteria that we have and the things that we require of our contractors and A&Es. The last topic there is the standard technical evaluation factors. We've just started pushing this out. You should actually be seeing these in RFPs that are on the street today. The factors have been piloted already. We are still tweaking them, but they are standards now. There are 6 of them. The first is corporate experience, then past performance, safety. There's a safety evaluation factor, technical solution, then sustainability, and small business. Out of the 6, the technical solution is the only one where we're providing any real leeway to the writers of the RFP in changing that factor. The other 5 should be very much almost verbatim in all of our RFPs. So again, if you start to see deviations from this in the RFPs that are out there, I would appreciate a phone call or an email to that regard so that we can check it out. The last topic that I've got up there is the total ownership cost evaluation factor. This is an ongoing DoD effort, working with Army and Air Force to develop this factor. Effort's been going on for nearly a year right now, and we expect that it'll probably be at least another probably 6 months before this is ready to go out prime time. The factor would end up taking the place of our sustainability factor of the 6 that I mentioned earlier, and it really is driving at just exactly what it says, that total ownership cost is now a very important aspect of the evaluation of products and of the types of products that we're receiving from the private sector, and we want to make sure that that is an evaluation in the selection of our contractor partners. The evaluation factor itself has 3 aspects to it. The first is the initial investment, which is the capital cost of the project. And then the other 2 are both based on 40-year lifetime. First is the energy cost to the facility over 40 years, and then the second is the sustainment cost. So contractors and their A&E team will be asked to put together a total ownership cost based on those items. Now, the factor itself is very specific. It provides a spreadsheet to be filled in, so there really isn't a lot of creation that has to be done by the contractors or their teams. It's more filling in the documents that the government provides. Currently, the team that's working this effort has an evaluation factor created for 8 different facility types.
Ladies and gentlemen, at this time, we're going to have to pause for a moment. We'll be right back with you.
All right, I think we're back. Hopefully everybody out there can hear me. If not, try turning up the volume on your own computers. In any event, back to the total ownership cost factor. I was saying that right now we have the factor developed for 8 different facility types. Over the next 6 months, another 7 we plan to fill in. And then we would have this available for those 15 different facility types across all of DoD when the factor goes prime time in March. Currently, we're running 2 pilots within the Navy, one at NAVFAC Mid-Atlantic and the other at NAVFAC Washington. We intend to finish those up within the next couple of months, at which point we will interview the Navy team that worked on the project and had to use the factors as they came in to evaluate proposals. We also intend to evaluate proposers to find out what they felt about the factors and how easy or hard it was to try and use it. At which point we would then go in and make any modifications necessary to the factor. At that point, the idea is that the Corps of Engineers, which is kind of holding back on it, wants to put it into a couple of their own projects, and then they're going to test it out. At that point, we as the Navy may go ahead and just start using it. The idea being that we've already test-driven it on a couple of projects, and we would just go ahead. That is yet to be determined. I think this is one of those where the Corps is kind of willing to let us get out in front of it a little bit and make sure that it's working correctly. With that, I think I've been through all of the topics that I'd like to talk about. I would like to thank all of our AAME and contractor partners in industry. For the most part, without you, we could not produce the products and services that we need for our Navy and Marine Corps supported commanders. So thank you very much, and now we can move to some questions from the audience.
Okay, the first question we have is with regards to the MILCON program, what are your expectations in reference to the Budget Act and a possible continuing resolution?
Well, I think you can count on a continuing resolution. I don't even know if a budget's been submitted at this point. With that in mind, though, the last couple of years, even with the CRA, the military construction part of the budget has gone ahead. It hasn't been on time. Nothing ever is with Congress, but it has been something that the Congress typically carves off that part of the budget, and we have an NDAA. I think the last couple of years it's usually been voted on and signed by the President before Christmas. Typically that means that we have monies available in the beginning part of the year, February timeframe. I would not expect our military construction program to fall much behind that. On the SRM side of the job, which is the maintenance side, typically what it allows us to do is to continue spending money at the rate at which we spent it the previous year. So we can continue to do those things that are necessary. We just aren't allowed to increase any of our budgets or to start any new efforts. What that does to us in the construction realm is that we're not allowed to do any new construction solicitations until either the NDAA is signed for the military construction or the full budget is signed for our maintenance projects.
Another question. With regards to the MILCON forecast that's posted, can the solicitation date be changed to show the issuance of Phase 1 vice Phase 2 of the RFP? Once Phase 2 is issued, the field has already been set and narrowed by the government. This is particularly important for design-build projects.
Yeah, it does sound like a pretty good idea. For the design-build projects, it doesn't make a lot of sense for us to post the Phase 2 date, because by then you've already missed your opportunity to participate. I'll take that for an action and talk to our guys and see if we can change that date in the forecast.
Could you repeat the 6 standard technical evaluation factors that you use?
Yes. The 6 standard factors that we've got out there, the first is corporate experience, which talks to the experience of the contractor contractor A&E team relative to the type of project that we have in the solicitation. So it's not just, hey, how many things have you built, but how many things like the thing that we're asking for have you built. The second factor is past performance. And again, it's past performance on projects that you've done that are similar to the project that we have in the solicitation. In both of those cases, we typically ask for anywhere between 3 and 5 relevant projects. Factor 3 is safety. With the safety factor, what we're looking for is we're looking, I think, at 2 particular factors in safety. They're industry factors, and we're just asking you guys to submit what you've got. They'll be evaluated and then compared against the baseline. In the technical solution for design build projects, usually what we've provided is some sort of a concept, performance requirements within the specification or in the RFP. The technical solution is really just trying to get a little bit more from you as to what it is that you intend to build for us. Maybe a little bit more information about the type of systems that you're going to put in, maybe a little bit about what the site might look like, and a little bit more about the building itself. Sustainability talks a little bit, as you might imagine, towards the types of materials that you're going to use in the facility and the length and sustainability of those materials. And then finally, the sixth factor is small business. That factor has been in our RFPs for, gosh, a decade at least, probably a little longer than that. So you all should be very familiar with that, I would expect.
Will NAVFAC consider GC betterments for design build and total ownership costs outside the new standardized forms that capture information through the template discipline?
Go ahead and repeat that.
Will NAVFAC consider GC betterments for design build and total ownership costs outside the new standardized forms that capture information through that template discipline?
Yeah, in fact, we just have been talking about that. With the new NDAA, it was very specific. Basically said that that the DoD will not spend $1 more to get anything more above LEED Silver. We do allow betterments. However, they have to be provided at no additional cost to the government. However that works out, that's the way it has to be. We cannot accept anything that is going to raise the cost of the project. We are also eliminating something that we've been using for quite a while now, and that's desirables, where we actually go in and kind of talk about things that may be a little bit above the requirements of the RFP. Those are being stricken now from the rest of our RFPs for the near future. Congress has kind of laid out the law, and we're going to follow along with what they say.
How will NAVFAC hold contractors accountable for its total ownership cost estimates in design build RFPs?
Well, the reality is that we can't hold you accountable 4 years from the day that you build your project. What we will do is evaluate the proposals that come in. Take a look at the assumptions that are being made. Most of those are going to be based on the types of equipment that you're providing, the type of building that you're going to build, whether it's stick built or whether it's masonry, the type of roof that you're going to put on a facility. Is it a standing seam metal that might have a 40-year life, or is it going to be an asphalt shingle that's only got 20-year life, 25-year? Those are the things that we're going to be evaluating, and those are things that I think most people in industry have a fairly good agreement upon as far as what the effect is and how long that effect takes place. Long term, we'll learn more about this as time goes on to determine how well we're doing with this total ownership cost factor. Certainly, we won't know that for several years, but once we do and we get better with it, we'll make adjustments as necessary.
Has NAVFAC chosen its BIM platform, Revit versus Bentley, or its facilities info model platform?
I can't say that we've chosen the platform, but we are using Revit in our 2 pilot projects. So take what you want out of that. I think that unless Revit ends up being very difficult to use for some reason, that appears to be where we're headed. And what was the second part of the question?
In regards to its facilities info model platform.
Not sure I quite understand that second part of the question. So I'll Klein, and maybe we can get some more information on that.
No more questions.
Okay. Well, I think that is the end of the questions that we've got here for the capital improvements section. We're now going to move forward to the small business presentation. The next presenter will be Barbara Taylor, who is our small business director here at NAVFAC Atlantic.
Good afternoon, everyone. I'm Barbara Taylor, NAVFAC Atlantic's Director of Office of Small Business Programs. Go to the next slide. I'd like to start out by providing NAVFAC's small business achievements for FY11 and how we are tracking in FY12 as of August. To the left of the slide are our final FY11 achievements. The second column shows NAVFAC targets for each small business category, followed by NAVFAC's overall achievements, and then NAVFAC Atlantic's total area of responsibility achievement. That includes NAVFAC Atlantic and our Echelon 4 commands. NAVFAC exceeded all goals with the exception of Hub Zone, which was a bare miss. All total, we awarded $3.6 billion to small business in FY11. $3 billion of those dollars were awarded throughout the NAVFAC Atlantic AOR. For all of our efforts in FY11, which includes our target achievements, our outreach program, our training, and overall program management, NAVFAC was awarded the Navy Small Business Secretary's Cup Award for FY11. We're very proud of this recognition, and it shows our strong commitment and emphasis to small business. Turning attention to the right-hand side of the slide, you'll see that NAVFAC, as well as NAVFAC Atlantic's achievements, are all in excess of this year's targets to date. Keep in mind that our achievements change on a daily basis as new awards are made. We pulled these statistics about a week or so ago, so the data that appears on the screen today will be slightly different than what was pulled. Well, actually, will be slightly different from day to day through the end of the fiscal year. Now I'd like to touch on the source selection factor that we include in our unrestricted, full and open best value selections. Ed actually mentioned this briefly during his presentation. This will be a refresher for those of you already doing business with NAVFAC. For those of you just starting out working with NAVFAC, it is very important that you understand the details of the factor. First of all, it's very important to understand that the factor applies to all size businesses, whether you are a large business or a small business. It consists of two sub-factors: past performance in utilizing small business concerns and small business participation under the specific contract. Under past performance, large businesses are required to submit final individual subcontract reports, or ISRs, or standard form 294 reports for federal projects referenced in the proposal. The ISR should annotate why any subcontracting goal was not met. If that explanation is not provided on your ISR or your SF-294, you need to include the explanation in your proposal. For newly established large businesses or large businesses with no federal subcontracting history, in other words, no ISRs or no SF-294s, you're required to submit your subcontracting history on the form provided in the RFP. Small business offerors are also to provide your previous utilization of small business subcontractors using the form supplied in the RFP. Now, there are other elements of past performance required to be submitted with your proposal that are not included in this presentation. For example, use of mentor-protege programs, performance evaluations, and use of niche or NIV organizations. Please read the sub-factor carefully when submitting under the RFP and answer all elements of the factor. And again, this applies to both large and small business offerors. The sub-factor for small business participation for the contract requires that large businesses submit a draft subcontracting plan utilizing the template provided in the RFP. The plan and template includes a section for proposing subcontracting goals and also includes all the required clauses from the FAR. the RFP will include NAVFAC subcontracting goals. If the proposed goals that you include in your subcontracting plan do not at least meet those included in the RFP, you must include a detailed explanation that describes how and why you arrived at the goals. For this subfactor, small businesses are not required to submit a subcontracting plan, as the regulations do not require plans from small businesses. However, for evaluation purposes, small business offerors are required to submit a proposed subcontracting breakdown using the format included in the RFP. Lastly, this subfactor also requires that all offerors provide the percentage of work and associated dollars that you plan to perform as the prime contractor. If you're submitting as a joint venture, you're required to submit the percentage of work each member will be responsible for and indicate the size status of each member. Okay. This next slide, Preparing Responsive Proposals, provides a few tips to keep in mind when preparing your proposal. These tips, in general, are applicable to both unrestricted procurements and small business set-aside procurements. Follow the outline of the evaluation criteria, address all aspects of each factor, provide explanations wherever necessary, use the attachments provided in the RFP, and limit your marketing fluff. Specific to our small business factor, all offerors, both large and small, must address all elements of the factor. For large businesses, individual subcontract reports, or SF-294s, must be the most recent, or in the case of completed contracts, the final report must be submitted. Otherwise, it will not be considered. This is a common error that we do find on our RFPs, so please don't let this happen to you. New large businesses to federal contracting, remember that you must also provide past performance data. To all offerors, do not include a not applicable as a response without including an explanation of why that particular element of a factor is not applicable to your firm. And for all offerors, do organize your response and proposal based on the order of the evaluation factors. On the next two slides, I'm going to just touch on very quickly just a few of the many initiatives taking place in general and also in regards to improving small business participation. First is accelerated payments for small business subcontractors. On July 11th, the Office of Management and Budget released Memorandum 12-16, which was providing prompt payment to small business subcontractors. The memo provides for a one-year transitional policy for agencies to take steps to encourage accelerated payment from prime contractors of any size to their small business subcontractors. And these efforts will provide significant benefits to small businesses by allowing them to better manage payroll and other expenses, to reduce reliance on interest-bearing lines of credit, and to improve relationships with their own suppliers by providing payments earlier. And as a matter of fact, just the end of last week, we received a class deviation that is providing for contracting officers to include this clause in new solicitations, and they may amend existing contracts as well. Next, an ongoing SBA review and revisions to size standards. As most of you know, SBA has this ongoing effort to review and revise size standards at varying intervals. One change that will affect NAVFAC procurements is the increase of NAICS code 541330, which is our A&E services NAICS code, which increased to $14 million from $4.5 million. In July of 2012, phase one of SAM, the System for Award Management, was kicked off in July. The system consolidates data and operations and combines multiple systems. The intent of the change is to lower operations and maintenance costs. Now, I strongly suggest that all businesses ensure that your information is up to date and is accurate, and you need to watch for future phase implementation. And as a side note to small businesses, ensure your most up-to-date information is included in the SBA Dynamic Small Business Search Database, which we commonly call DSBS. My last slide quickly addresses a couple of proposed rules related to subcontracting initiatives included in the Small Business Jobs Act and consideration of set-asides on task and delivery order contracts. By no means are these all-inclusive. There are numerous ongoing initiatives in all various stages of implementation. It is very important that you keep informed by reviewing the Federal Register, SBA's website, and other websites and regulations to ensure you keep up with the most up-to-date information available. So quickly, on October 5th, 2011, and amended on December 1st of 2011, SBA published a proposed rule regarding subcontracting integrity, essentially stating that the prime must make a good faith effort to award subcontracts to small businesses at the same percentage proposed in their subcontracting plan, to submit written justification if percentage is not met, to notify the contracting officer in writing whenever the prime contractor does not utilize the subcontractor used in preparing its bid or proposal during contract performance, and to notify the contracting officer in writing if reduced price is paid to a subcontractor or if payment to a subcontractor is 90 days past due. Then lastly, on May 16th of 2012, SBA published in the Federal Register a proposed rule providing more specific guidance in connection with the award of multiple award contracts and task and delivery orders placed underneath them, and that those tools are used in a consistent manner. This relates to the enactment of 1331 and the Small Business Jobs Act of 2010. Consideration of task and delivery order set-asides under multiple award contracts, both new and existing, consideration of partial set-asides under multiple award contracts, and consideration of small business reserves under multiple award contracts using full and open competition. This proposed rule also addressed the requirement to publish rationale for bundling of agency websites. Any consolidated contract greater than $2 million will require a senior procurement executive or chief acquisition officer to ensure market research is conducted and determination of consolidation is necessary. In summary, proposed rules, once published, provide for a comment period. If you're interested in a particular topic, you should be commenting on proposed rules. Each comment is reviewed and considered in finalizing rules and regulations. If you want your voice to be heard, you must participate during the comment period. I would like to reiterate that the proposed rules that I've discussed here are not all-inclusive and are by no means representative of all proposed rules that are pending or in various stages of development. If you'd like to learn more about doing business with NAVFAC, you can visit our small business webpage that's listed on the screen. Now, I'll entertain any questions.
Past performance for small business utilization. If a contractor does not have ISR SS-294s for the relevant projects provided as evidence in the experience and past performance factors, may we provide small business past performance documentation for other contracts?
That's a long question. I don't know if I can repeat it, so hopefully everybody heard it. With regard to past performance, if you are a large business without federal procurement experience, or if your past performance projects did not include an ISR or SF-294, I would suggest that you respond in kind to the projects that you are actually submitting under the technical portion of your proposal. And then what you can do, and this would be an allowance in your proposal, you know, you have a page limitation that you could submit additional information, but I would first address specifically the relationship of your subcontracting history with the projects that you're submitting under the other technical portion of the proposal.
How is Prime A&E to accurately complete a small business subcontracting plan when tasks are not known at the beginning of an IDIQ type contract?
Well, you're going to estimate. It is a plan. That's what a subcontracting plan is a plan. It would be the same thing on a multiple award construction contract, any type of MAC contract. You're going to take the estimated value and you're going to, through historical information, through anything you can gather about procurement, you're going to guesstimate, if you will, the amount of work that you would perform as the prime contractor. What's left over from that is what you would apply to the subcontracting. You should have some type of database available, one would hope, particularly if you've been in the federal arena for any length of time, of the various types of subcontractors that you utilize, and you would set out a plan. And just keep in mind that when you submit your ISR as the project, after the contract's awarded, and 6 months down the road, you're submitting your subcontracting report, it is going to be based on the task orders that you have received under the contract, not the value of the procurement. So in the beginning, it's a plan against the value of the procurement, and then as work is received under the contract, then you will apply your percentages to the projects you actually receive. Okay, that concludes my small business portion of the webinar, and I'm going to turn it over to Ms. Patricia Callahan, who is our Director of Acquisition.
Good afternoon. I'm Patty Callahan, the Acquisition Director here at NAVFAC Atlantic. Pleasure to be with you today. I'm going to talk about a few areas. We're going to spend a lot of time on acquisition strategy. I'll talk about our acquisition toolbox. I'll also talk about what goes on behind the scenes as we develop that toolbox. We'll also discuss some of our selection methods. I'll also give you some general information, and we'll look at source selection procedures and how they've changed recently. I'll also give you some current trends in acquisition and talk about some current events here at NAVFAC Atlantic and some changes that we've had in execution and the types of work we execute here. And then at that point in time, we'll have enough time to answer your questions, as many as we can. And for those that we can't answer, we'll take them back if there are any and try to answer them and get them back to you at a later time. With that, let's go ahead and start with talking about acquisition strategies. Next slide, please. I'm going to give you a little bit, as I said, of a story behind the scenes on how we go about developing our acquisition strategies, our acquisition toolbox, etc. First, let me start with our goal. And our goal is to provide a comprehensive corporate acquisition toolbox that meets NAVFAC Atlantic's requirements, but most importantly, our supported commanders' requirements. And in doing so, you know, we want to be agile, we want to be ready for emergent requirements, and we want to also be ready to execute our program as our program of record. We first look at some of the requirements, and our requirements are based on a number of things. They're based on historical data, you know, what we've done in the past, and then we also take into consideration any lessons learned from that past work that we've done. We also look at our projected workload. Typically, with our projected workload, we have a good handle on what's coming up as far as our program of record, but you know, we also get a few curves thrown at us, such as, or for example, ARRA was something that we were not forecasting, but we needed to be flexible enough to answer the mail, and I think we were pretty successful in doing that. We'll also look at our gap analysis, which is just what it says. You know, we look at what we have versus what we need, what we currently have versus what we need. And we also take into consideration any emerging innovative methodologies and practices in the industry, such as design build with an innovative methodology a number of years ago, and now it's standard business practice. But other emerging innovative technologies, such as early contractor involvement and any new emerging technologies that we haven't even thought of yet, that I'm sure will be out there that we'll have to consider at some point in time. And then we also need to take into consideration laws and regulations. For example, the National Defense Authorization Act of 2012 said that you can no longer do construction contracts via a cost-type contract. So, of course, knowing that, we've needed to make adjustments accordingly. And then there's the regulations that I mentioned, and that's any new regulations, any new policies. A regulation that I'm going to, well, not a regulation, but a policy that I'm going to talk to you about in a little while are the new DoD source selection procedures that are now in place, which impacts the way you do business. And I'll talk a little bit about that when I get to to the slide that talks about some initiatives. So we look at the requirement, we look at what our requirements are based on. We also have other considerations for our acquisition tools, and pretty explanatory, but I'll go through them just to give you a little extra information. For example, our program requirements. We're looking at obviously both our short-term, our long-term requirements. We also are going to look at what existing contract tools that we have out there and what new contract tools that we'll need based on any holes that we have. And what we also consider the contract capacities that we have existing and the need for additional contract capacity, and in what areas do we need that contract capacity. And I think the last two Barbara hit on a little bit earlier, when we also have to consider the small business program and market research. The regulations require us to do market research to pulse the socioeconomic interest and ability at large before we make a decision on whether or not we're going to do a set-aside or not. And just to tell you a little bit about acquisition strategies in the formal sense, we have formalized written acquisition strategies for all of our business lines. Just to give you an example, I'll talk about the capital improvements acquisition strategy, just to tell you how we formalize it in NAVFAC. NAVFAC headquarters will issue some overarching guidance in a format of the strategy they want us to consider in terms of the big rules, the macro rules. And then we at NAVFAC will issue any supplemental guidance, maybe some initial policies that are based on our AORs. And then the facility engineering commands will complete their own strategy based on their program of record, their projections of workload, et cetera, the tools that they have available. And then we'll receive the 7 facility engineering command individual strategies, roll it up into one very comprehensive acquisition strategy that's NAVFAC Atlantic's corporate plan. So that's kind of how the formalized acquisition strategy process works. Now, a little bit about our, next slide, please. A little bit about our selection methods. We have a wide range of selection methods that we utilize. We use a couple, a lot more than others, and frankly, it's based on the time requirement to execute, the time requirement in military construction for the building to be built, for example, the project we're talking about, the capacity of existing tools, the complexity of the project, the competition that we think is available. All of these things come into play when we try to determine what strategy we think best fits the situation. I'll go to a couple because we, as I said, we use them a lot, and that's the standalone best value source selection process. That's a very important process for us. You'll almost always see us use that in a very complex, complicated procurement, and we'll also use it when any project that's over $50 million. We have a policy that says if it's over $50 million, it has to be done by standalone unless we get a waiver. And the waiver has to come from the appropriate business line or the applicable business line and me. And I'll tell you, we rarely will let a project over $50 million go to a MAC arrangement. We're pretty much big on staying with that plan of a standalone because it's critical that we maximize competition. Then I'll also talk a little bit about the MAC best value source selection process. You see us use the mini source selection process a lot in a MAC arrangement where we have a number of contractors, the multiple award contract, I should say, where we have a number of contractors who are industry partners on the MAC arrangement. We'll use a mini source selection process because we've already proved those contractors, when they enter into that partnership, that MAC arrangement with us, they are already proven contractors to us. So we'll use a very streamlined approach that's a mini best value source selection. We also use multiple award contract, lowest price technically acceptable as a mechanism to execute our work. And you've probably seen a lot of LPTAs in the MAC arrangement. You'll probably see a lot more. That's turned out to be a real successful tool for us in the recent past. And then also So those are really the key ones we use: best value source selection, MAC best value source selection, and LPTAs in a MAC arrangement. Now you'll notice we only have construction and A&E written up there, but actually those same arrangements are used for our environmental and our public works and BOSS type contracts. Next slide. Now that we've talked about how we come up with our toolbox, some of the selection methods, I'd like to talk about some general information and a look at our source selection procedures. I said this before, let me say again: competition, competition, competition. We want to maximize competition as much as possible. We don't want to limit it. We strive for a balanced approach between multiple award contracts and best value standalone contracts. We want to maximize versus limit competition as much as we can. You heard Ed Gallagher speak about it a few minutes ago when he talked about specifications not being unduly restrictive. We pay close attention to that. We want to make sure that we aren't unduly restrictive so that we are maximizing our opportunities for competition. I'll talk a little bit about that one as we go further, but I think it's key to competition, and when we see specs that are overly restrictive, we want to know about it. The next bullet there is simple and basic advice, but you'd be surprised at the types of proposals that we see. So I want to give you a pearl of wisdom that's pretty basic and simple when you think about it, and that's read the solicitation carefully before responding and submit complete proposals. Understand the contract terms, not just the technical requirements. Make sure you take a look at answering the evaluation factors that are set forth in that solicitation. You'd be surprised at the number of proposals that we get from very, very good firms that that don't tell how they intend to do the work, and that's critical. So I offer that as a way of advice. Let me talk a little bit about how you should see our contract structured now. Our contracts are structured to allow availability throughout the NAVFAC Atlantic AOR, but predominantly one region in most of our solicitations, and there's a reason for that. I talked about how critical our acquisition toolbox is to us so that we can be responsive, flexible, quick to execute as necessary. Those are key points. We want our acquisition toolbox to be as comprehensive as possible. We're an interdependent NAVFAC Atlantic, so we've wanted to make our solicitations more flexible for that reason. And what that means is you should see our solicitation say something like, this contract, this solicitation is for and I'll use NAVFAC Mid-Atlantic. This solicitation is for the NAVFAC Mid-Atlantic AOR, predominantly for the NAVFAC Mid-Atlantic AOR, but available to the NAVFAC Atlantic AOR. And what that means is when you're signing up, when you're entering into an agreement with us to do a contract with NAVFAC Mid-Atlantic in that case, the predominant of the work, or probably all of the work in most cases, will be done with Midland. However, there might be a need throughout our AOR to tap into that contract from time to time. We would do that in a collaborative partnership manner with you. So that's what that means. But you should see that more and more in most of our contracts. Now I talk about the DoD source selection guide, because this has some pretty critical impacts to you. There really are two or three things that I think bear talking about. The new DoD selection guide has changed terminology, and it's changed terminology in terms of consistent use of adjectival ratings. It has changed the terminology of the boards that we use. It's even changed the terminology of technical factors. Technical factors are now called non-cost price factors. So that's one area that it's changed. But a key area, and I'll spend a little bit of time on this, is in past performance. It's really changed the way we treat past performance. And then the third thing I'll mention is it's changed how we treat discussions. The DoD selection guide now says that discussions are encouraged. I'll talk about that in a second, however. So recent change to, I notice it says on the slide NAVFAC source selections. It's really recent changes to DoD source selections that will impact you. As I indicated, the standard adjectival ratings for non-cost price, which you know as technical factors, are listed there as outstanding, good, acceptable, marginal, and unacceptable. Now I'll talk about past performance. Past performance is now a separate non-cost price factor, which it did not used to be. It used to be a technical factor along with all the others such as technical approach and corporate experience and small business. It is now a separate non-cost price factor, and it receives a confidence rating. What does that mean? It receives a relevancy and confidence rating in terms of risk management of how you would perform if you were selected to do the job. The evaluation of recent efforts and relevancy to anticipated contracts, and also a determination of how well you performed on those relevant projects. Past performance ratings range from substantial confidence to no confidence, and then the old neutral rating is considered unknown in past performance situation. So completely different way that we look at past performance. We look at it separately, and in summary, we look at it separately, and we look at it in terms of the relevancy and the confidence that we have that you can, in fact, do the job. And I mentioned discussions. Discussions in the guide itself are now encouraged. And you will see us use discussions an awful lot when there's actually a reason for discussions. We're very sensitive to make sure that we do not conduct discussions when we can't have meaningful discussions. It's a waste of your time, it's a waste of your money, and it's a waste of our time if we conduct discussions that aren't meaningful. So when we go into discussions, we're doing it because we think that there is a way to close any loop on your proposal. Since past performance has greater weight than it ever had in the past, it leads me to talk about current trends. Next slide, please. Leads me to talk about some current trends. Contractor performance assessment system. We've had a number of industry forums, and this has been a topic of conversation. I've spoken on a number of industry panels and association meetings, and this is a very critical area that we always discuss. I talked to you some time ago about us having a backlog. We've greatly reduced that backlog. We continue to greatly reduce that backlog. Just to tell you what we've done here at NAVFAC Atlantic, we've put strong senior leadership attention on it. We feel very strongly that you work hard for us, you partner with us, and you deserve a past performance rating, CPARS rating. So, you know, we need to be responsive to your needs in that area so that you can have those for future source selections. And that's our commitment to you. We'll continue to work hard to reduce the backlog and maintain that, keep that backlog down. We also talked at industry forums. In fact, we heard you loud and clear and changed our past performance questionnaire policy. We partnered with the Corps of Engineers to come up with a consistent policy, a consistent form when it comes to past performance questionnaires. This policy's been in place for about a year, and as I said, it was based on input from you. We're using a standardized format. You must use the form that's required to be completed, but once you complete a job, you can have your client complete the PPQ. You can keep it on file, and then when you submit your proposal to us on any of your jobs where it's relevant, you can submit that PPQ with your proposal. As I said, that was a change that I think, you know, we heard you loud and clear. I think your clients were getting tired of having to fill out a multitude of these things. So, you know, we put this policy in place for you, and hopefully you've seen the benefits from that. Now, if there is a CPARS in place in the system, that should be submitted in lieu of the PPQ. Ed talked to you a little bit about standard factors, and I'm going to echo a little bit of that. You know, we are always trying to be consistent, strive for consistency in terms of our source selection process. One of the criticisms that I've heard, and thank goodness I'm hearing it less now because we've put a concerted effort to it, but one of the criticisms that I hear a lot is that if you go to Spec X versus Spec Y, we do source selections differently. We're trying to close that gap, and I think we've made a lot of great progress in closing that gap. So now, one of the steps for consistency has been to use standardized design build factors for any of our solicitations. And as Ed mentioned, they're standardized. You might see tweaks, but for the most part, you'll see these evaluation factors when you see our work in the design build arena. I need to tell you that in phase one, it's technical approach, experience, past performance, and in phase two, energy and sustainability is actually sustainability. It was energy and sustainability, but that's been changed. So those are the factors that you'll see in any of the source selections that you do with us, unless there's some reason that we needed to tweak those factors. Let me mention experience again and talk about that. I mentioned earlier, you should not see us be overly restrictive in this, and I'll give you an example. You should not see, you have to have NAVFAC experience, you have to have Navy experience, you have to have DOD experience, because if you can build a hospital, you can build a hospital, for example. And we've been really hard over on this recently, over the last couple of years, in our efforts to really maximize competition as much as we can. So, as I indicated earlier, if you see unduly restrictive specifications, please contact the applicable acquisition office of the Facility Engineering Command that's putting out the solicitation. And they will want to take that into consideration and probably make changes to it. Next slide, please. Now I'm going to talk a little bit about some current execution here at NAVFAC Atlantic, some things that are going on in terms of solicitations out there. I'm also going to talk about some changes in some way we're doing business here, something new for us. Current execution at NAVFAC, you'll notice that GCC, the Global Contingency Construction Contract, that's a multiple award contract for hurricanes and other natural disasters. It's really a neat tool. It's a firm fixed price cost plus hybrid contract to give us more flexibility. Notice I use the word flexibility a lot, but I think that's pretty key in our business. So the Global Contingency Construction Contract is out there. We also have a couple of environmental global contracts that are out there. NAVFAC's mission NAVFAC Atlantic here at LRA's mission has been to do things like the contingency contract and any global contract or any contract that crosses AORs, crosses regions, crosses FECs. We still will continue to do that, but we're taking on some additional execution here at NAVFAC as well. For the first time, we're starting to do, under the NAVFAC Atlantic organization, we're starting to do base operating services contracts centralized here at NAVFAC Atlantic. We will do the BOSS contracts for all of our facility engineering commands with the exception of NAVFAC Southeast and NAVFAC Southwest, where they will continue to be the PCO. In all of these contracts that I've talked about where we're the PCO or the procuring contracting office, the administration of those contracts will be done at the applicable facility engineering command. And then starting in FY13, a majority of your AVSWA's MILCON program will be centralized here at NAVFAC Atlantic for execution as well. Once again, your AVSWA will retain the administrative contracting office responsibilities and responsibility for execution of the projects, but we'll just be doing the source selections here at NAVFAC Atlantic as a means of centralized reach back. There's an interesting new program to accelerate payments. That's a new current initiative that's ongoing. The Office of Management and Budget sent out a memo, disseminated a memo to DOD activities well, not just DOD activities, but federal activities in July of 2012, directing agencies to change their policy on prompt payment as an effort to improve cash flow, predominantly to small businesses and socioeconomic programs, but to large businesses as well. But its initial key was to really improve cash flow for the small businesses. What this means, you should start getting your money faster. Instead of us taking 30 days, it should take us about 15 days. Now, I need to point out that there will be no interest between 15 and 30 days. It just means we're processing faster. And we've done a little query to see how this is working, and it seems to be working very well. DFAS is doing a great job of getting those payments out to you within the 15 days as opposed to the 30 days. That concludes our look at our acquisition toolbox, our acquisition strategies, the selection, our source selection process, the selection methods that we use, and any new initiatives that we have going on at NAVFAC Atlantic. So with that, I'm going to go ahead and take any questions that you may have.
With regard to source selection, you say you do trade-offs, but it seems like you always award to the low bidder. Why don't you just do LPTA?
Okay, well, I think you will see us use LPTA a lot more than we have done in the past. It's worked really well for us. I think you'll still see us use it. I think you'll see us use it more. But now let me answer the first part of that question. We're evaluating, in the best value source selection trade-off process, we are evaluating technical solutions in a trade-off format. And in those situations where all proposals are technically equal, then it will revert to price, the decision. It will come down to price. We also look to see if a higher technical rating or a higher technical rated proposal is worth the additional price that if they're not the low price. So, you know, it's a trade-off process. Long-winded answer to it's a trade-off process. When all technical proposals are of an equal nature, it will revert to price. Next question, please.
How long are performance evaluations available in the system?
In the CPAR system?
Yes.
6 years after contract completion date.
In a two-phase solicitation, you tell us if we don't make it to phase 2, but you don't tell us who does. Why? That's actually considered source, in accordance with the FAR, we're prohibited from doing that. It's actually considered source selection information. We do not divulge the ongoing competitors. How long a term can an A&E contract have? Is it 3 years or is it 5 years? I've seen both in the past year.
Yeah, some time ago we were at 5 years, and then we were restricted to 3 years, and now we're back to 5 years for an A&E contract. For knowledge-based services contract, however, we're still at 3 years.
Is price always equal to technical?
No. Price being equal to technical is our default. But really the FAR allows us to do a couple of things. It allows us technically significantly more important than price, technically equal to price, or price is more important than technical. But that is our default.
Last year you had a lot of short-fused requirements on MAC contracts, and it was hard to price all of them. Do you expect to have more of the same this year?
Once again, we hope that was a unique situation with CRA last year. But I'll tell you, when we get requirements, and especially when they're towards the end of the year, we do the best that we can to give you as much time as we can possibly give you and still meet the deadline for execution on the 30th. But always when we're looking at a new requirement, we try to do our best to give you as much time as we possibly can, because we know the time frame requirements that it takes for you to do the work, to do the proposal prep. Okay, thank you very much. Our next presenter will be Mr. Dave Kerfman. He's the Public Works Business Line Manager.
Good afternoon. My name is David Kerfman. I'm the Public Works Business Line Manager for NAVFAC Atlantic. We're going to talk today about the Public Works Business Line, At NAVFAC Atlantic, we have 4 products and services delivered within that product line, or business line. So if you go to the next slide, please. Over to the left, you'll see those 4 products and services. The first one is the one we're going to be spending most of the discussion regarding today, facility support, contract management, and facility services. That's a long phrase for our BOSS contracts and our FSC contracts. The second one is facilities management and sustainment. That's our in-house workforces. And the third one, utilities and energy management, is the actual procurement and management and delivery of the utilities for the Navy. And the last one is the base support vehicles and equipment. The last 2 actually do have significant amount of contracting in acquiring the utilities from the suppliers and in purchasing and leasing vehicles. However, we're not going to spend any time on that today, but because I think most of the audience is more interested in the first topic, which is the facility support, contract management, and facility services. The Public Works business line within NAVFAC has 10,000 employees, give or take a few thousand, and over $4 billion in work annually. At the top of the screen to the right, you'll see FIP, which is our Facilities in Place acronym, and you'll see that NAVFAC Atlantic has about $1.2 billion a year, which includes the facility support contracts and BOSS contracts is actually in place, the work being done in any given year. NAVFAC Pacific at $300 million for a total of about $1.5 billion throughout the world. The next couple lines deal with how many calls we get, how many times people are picking up the phone and saying, I need help with this or that. And as you can see, it's nearly 600,000 calls. Probably about half are through our facility support contracts. So with the dollars and projects and tasks that we're talking about in that product line, about half of them are approximately for those calls. We have about 90,000 facilities that need management, maintenance, sustainment, and also we'll talk later. Mr. Ken Little will come up afterwards and talk about our energy projects. So I won't be speaking about that during this one, but it'll follow immediately. So next slide, please. This slide gives an estimation of the amount of facility support contracts and BOSS contract dollar volume in FY13. Not the size of the contracts we're awarding, it's the amount of work that's being executed during this fiscal year. As Ms. Callahan said earlier, we are centralizing the BOSS contract pre-award at NAVFAC Atlantic, NAVFAC Southeast and Southwest, and NAVFAC Pacific that's not on this chart. So if you look at the chart, the orange one is NAVFAC Southwest. The one at the lower half is 279 is NAVFAC Southeast. So the rest of the contracts, or the BOSS contracts and the rest of the AOR are at NAVFAC Atlantic. Now this chart includes both BOSS contracts and FSC contracts. So again, it's a dollar volume of both. The actual amount of contracts that will be awarded in FY13 for facilities is probably about 20 to 25% of that $1.1 billion. So you're looking at about $200 to $300 million throughout the NAVFAC Atlantic AOR. And we defined BOSS contracts as those contracts that have 3 or more services attached to them. So a facility support contract would be up to 3 or 1 or 2, and then a BOSS contract is 3 or more. Next slide, please. Now this slide will give you an indication of the types of work that are contained in these services contracts. And you'll see the variety includes wastewater, pavement clearance. There is some transportation, environmental, grounds maintenance, integrated solid waste management is what ISWM stands for, pest control, custodial, and facilities investment. You'll see at the top left, 654 total contracts are in place roughly at any given time. I think that's right now, that's how many are in place. That include about 1,200 annexes, which are each of the service areas. So if you look at the 600 total contracts, there's probably about 50 or so BOSS contracts, therefore 600 FSC type contracts. So a lot of work out there, a lot of effort going on. The numbers that are shown in the pie chart, for example, custodial 128, that's the actual number of existing and annexes for FY13 dealing with custodial services throughout the NAVFAC Atlantic AOR. So a lot of work in that area. Next slide, please. As Ms. Callahan mentioned, as I said earlier, we are centralizing the BOSS contracts at four locations, actually, NAVFAC Atlantic, NAVFAC Pacific, NAVFAC Southeast, and NAVFAC Southwest. And so what you'll see here is the contracts that are being planned for NAVFAC Atlantic. These at times may duplicate what you'll see on the FAC presentations that'll come up in future days. Basically, it may be, you may see the first three, for example, on the URASWA brief, but these will actually be awarded from NAVFAC Atlantic. We put some budget ranges over to the right to give you an idea of the dollar volume. We've given a plan for the next few years. You'll see the work on the next several slides at NAVFAC Atlantic. However, I do want to stress in the slides before that there are so many contracts out there that obviously I'm not going to be able to go through all 654 right now to tell you what's going on. But if you look at each of the FEC presentations, most of those will get down to that level, at least for the BOSS type work. Some of the larger FSC type work, but I doubt you'll actually see it in this presentation, an actual listing of all 654 contracts that are ongoing at any time, or the subset of those that will be awarded in FY13. As I said, roughly 20 to 25% of those. So I'll take us through the next couple slides, but I do want to emphasize a few things about our contracts this year. As has been mentioned before, I do want to stress that safety is a very important factor in our evaluation factors list. It's one of the non-price factors. It's very important. I think you've heard it several times already today. But it will be used in the selection of our contractors for BOSS and FSC contracts. We do use standard measurements to determine safety, such as the DART rates and EMR rates, and also the technical approach to safety. Also, past performance has been mentioned before. I just want to reemphasize as well that that is a critical factor. About 25% of the overall criteria for evaluation factors. It's up to half, which consequently is up to half of the non-price evaluation factors. So please keep in mind that safety and past performance are critical. I think the question has been in the past, also what period are these award contracts? All of our, I think all of them, is 5-year awards. We were going 3 and then 9, but now we've settled out at 5 as per DoD directives, as Ms. Callahan said earlier. So that is a quick overview of the FSC and BOSS contracts. I got zipped through it pretty quickly. Do we have any questions?
Where do utilities fall in the given categories?
Let's go back a couple slides. I assume the question was, where do utilities fall in the given categories? Can you go back a few more here, please? This slide here, utility support. We do have a specific annex. It's in the all other annexes combined area. It's not as big of a one to pull out, so we didn't separate it, but it's up in that upper left quadrant or near quadrant.
Is the Navy writing its own contracts or using A&E or other contractor help?
Yeah, that's a good question. The Navy is currently writing our own contracts. We do all of that work in-house, certainly because it's part of defining the scope of work and accepting the product and responsibility of the federal government. So that's something we take a lot of personal ownership with and develop in-house.
We have heard confusing information. What is the allowable contract duration for service contracts?
Yeah, I think I did mention that 5 years is the duration. There are no more award options in the future, so they will be 5 years, and that's something certainly to plan on. I think another question that has come up before, I did want to address it as well, is the amount of small business work that's in the FSC and BOSS contract arena. We did typically about 70% of our current FSC and BOSS contract work is small business work. So a significant amount of this effort devoted to small business. So do we have any other questions?
Can you better define what is included in the facility investment category?
Yes, that's a good question. Broad topic. Essentially, that's the fixing work that happens. So it's our preventative maintenance work. It's our general maintenance work. It's service calls, minor repair work, minor work on buildings and facilities is all wrapped up into that facilities investment category. So is there any more questions? Let me see if there's anything else I wanted to cover. I did want to say one thing about our templates. As Mr. Gallagher has mentioned earlier, in the capital improvements business line, they have the NAVFAC criteria office that helps develop facilities criteria, unified facility criteria, and unified facility guide specs, et cetera. In the BOSS and FSC world, we have performance work statement templates. And we have about 18 of those that are fairly standardized. 2 are general information, and the other 16 are technical areas, such as air ops, supply, utilities, facility support, et cetera. So you should see some consistency in those templates, no matter where you're bidding and throughout the world. Obviously, there's nuances and changes local to the specific requirements, but in general, everyone starts off with the template and that has the same requirements on it. So I did want to add that. If there are no more questions, I believe we will conclude. I'm now going to turn it over to Mr. Ken Little to talk about our energy projects and our energy work in NAVFAC Atlanta.
Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening to some of y'all out there. My name is Ken Little. It's approximately 13:45 Eastern Time. For those of you that are Dr. Pepper fans, if you pop one open at 10, 2, and 4, which is 2 o'clock, feel free to do so. I'm going to keep moving on anyway. If you're on East Coast time. Some of you on the West Coast probably already had yours at 10. Nevertheless, I am Ken Little from NAVFAC Operations. I do not work in the Public Works business line. I am a coordinator of projects that go across all of the products and services that we have. Today, primarily what you're going to hear from me is mostly on our brick and mortar projects, and we'll touch on some other areas. Today, we're going to talk about our energy goals and our Navy shore energy strategy, energy programs, and most of y'all are interested in our NAVFAC workload. If you happen to see our presentation last year, our hands were kind of tied. There's a lot about the future we can't talk about. We'll do the best we can to give you what we can on our workload, and we will also talk about the past, because a year ago, as we are today, there's certain projects we couldn't talk about, so you'll wonder why are we going back in time, but it's the best that we can offer at this point for some of our newer type energy programs. And then lastly, I'm going to touch on net zero. I'm not going to read all these off, but there's 2 areas that our mandates and goals are driven by, and they're federal, and of course some of them come from SECNAV. And the ones that I just want to bring to your attention is that we do electrical and water evaluations every 4 years, and when you read that bullet, it's in the context of 25% of our facilities are audited every 4 years. So we really do something every year, and we currently have contracts out in all 7 of our facility engineering commands to do approximately 25% of our facilities. There are a lot of exclusions out there. It's not every facility, but it captures about 80% of our buildings and major facilities. The other thing I'd like to bring out is you'll see the bullet electrical AMI meters by 2012. We actually have in place right now AMI contracts across all of our 7 facilities engineering commands. The 2 last ones that were recently awarded were in URASWA in Europe and also Naval Facilities Engineering Command Mid-Atlantic. What I wanted to just point out here is that those contracts include not only electrical but gas, steam, and water. The number of meters change every month, but we targeted approximately 20,000 meters that will be installed over about a 2.5-year period. And then for the SEC-NAV goals, you'll see the first one there, 50% of facilities net zero by 2012, and I'm going to talk about that toward the end of our presentation. I'm not going to talk about any of the petroleum or non-tactical fuels, just going to talk about facilities ashore. On this slide here, slide 46, this is a standard slide that we show everybody, so some of y'all may have seen this before at other venues or in the past. But our Navy Shore Energy Strategy is comprised of 3 different pieces. On the top left, you'll see where we have a culture of consumption to culture of conservation. It doesn't impact you directly, but just so you know, our sailors and Marine Corps and our Marines and all of our other family members, as well as our civilians, are receiving training and getting constant reminders to turn our thermostats, lower the thermostats in the summertime, and turn our lights off. So this is part of our culture. We have many things that we do on that. Just wanted to bring that up. On the right-hand side, energy security, we talk about it a lot with redundancy, resiliency, and reliability. What that really means is that at this point right now, we don't have a specific program that highlights that, but across many of our different programs and focus areas, which I'll speak to in a moment, we work on energy security where we are trying to become more and more independent and to somewhat get off the grid. It's a very high goal for us to reach, but that is where we are heading toward in our installations between now and 2025. And then on the bottom left, you will see the right technology at the right time. This is a part of a DoD strategy where we are to watch, partner, and lead. And it is by design to watch others, meaning those outside of the Navy and the Marine Corps, to see how they are working on their energy projects, energy programs, energy initiatives, energy technology. If we see things that we like, we will partner with those folks, and we have done that in more than 10 occasions. I will not cite those now, but we have partnered with universities. There's been grants that have been given to where the Navy's been working with. And then the last one is to lead, which obviously at some point we will have so much underneath our belt. We hope to be a leader within the DoD. All right, next slide, please. This slide right here, 47, you will hear the Navy has an energy program. The truth is that when you break it down, we have traditional energy projects and programs on the left, and I'll speak to those, and then on the right we have focus areas. So on the left, the first block is ESIP's Energy Conservation Improvement Projects. Those projects are funded with OSD funds. It is a subset of our MILCON program. That program has been around since the 80s. In the past, for the big picture, the Department of Navy, the Navy, Blue Navy, has received approximately $25 million on average. We recently got a plus up for all of NAVFAC to about $40 million. So there's been an increase in dollars spent on that program. And I have slides to show you where we're going with that. For the finance projects, the UESC, Utility Energy Service Contracts, and Energy Service Performance Contracts, those finance projects have also been programs we've had around for a long time. One of the things that we've seen recently that's kind of a change for us here within NAVFAC is that a lot of those things, especially in UESC and ESPC both, were inside the building. Now they're kind of outside the 5-foot line, which has driven us into renewables primarily, where we have to get NEPA documentation We have to do more planning and larger designs, and everything's bigger and better, and takes us longer. So that's kind of where we are on those traditional energy projects, and I've got slides on that also. Then on the right, the funding program focus areas. Now, I know I put up here FY12 because this is when it started and we're coming up on FY13. But in this particular Milcon Energy, in FY12, we had 3 decentralization projects, and I'll show you the details on that later. We have none in FY13 at this point. For SRM Energy, Sustainment, Restoration, and Modernization, which has been renamed, and you'll see it shown differently later as RME, it is funded by Commander Navy Installations Command, and in FY12, they set aside for all of NAVFAC for operations, maintenance, and Navy $250 million, and Land had a subset of that. And then lastly, another focus area is major maintenance and repair. We call it MMRPE. This particular type of project is our own Navy working capital machine where we are running utilities for water, steam, and so forth, and we have money set aside. The most important thing for the audience to hear on this is that these programs in 12, these programs in 13, if you do see them, it is not new money. It comes from the existing programs. So SRM Energy, for example, $250 million in FY12 was a subset of an $800 million program that did not get any larger when they added energy to it. So that's kind of the takeaway there. So a little bit more on the details, and this is kind of my outlook on this, is just looking backwards because we cannot give all the information out to you, but I'll touch on it real quick here. The Energy Conservation Investment Program, we had in FY11, we had 8 projects at $7 million for all of NAVFAC Atlantic. That does not include our Pacific brothers and sisters, and you can see the ranges on there. In FY12, our current year, we have 21 projects valued at $51 million. Some of those have been awarded, some of those have not, and probably about 25% of those are going to be actually carrying over to next year. So if you're still looking for work in that area, if you go through your contract, your Fed Biz Ops, you should be able to find those few projects that are remaining out there. And it's the same area again, solar, hot water, wind, and so forth. The FY13 program, we have not received our official list from OSD, therefore it's unpublished. I will show you the projects that we did do in the previous years to give you an idea of what type of work we have. And then on the second half of the slide, financed energy projects. These are projects that pay for themselves from savings. For the energy savings performance contracts, NAVFAC Atlantic did not have any projects in FY11 nor 12. We do have projects forecasted in FY13. We have an internal call for work that's due in September. For those of you that were following the executive order that came out about ESPCs, the Navy does have an apportionment. It's around $200 million. And I'm trying to give you a hint here without giving you too much, but we expect probably half of that or a third of that may be coming our way in FY13. Locations to be determined. And then utility energy savings contracts, again, similar to ESPC. We have a call for work that comes from our Commander Navy regions, the 7 that we work with. We have not received their submissions yet. But to give you an idea, the program has been decreasing numerically in projects. We had 10 in FY11 and 7 in FY12. Next slide, please. Now, the Navy Energy Focus projects, these are projects that are part of an existing program that you may or may not be familiar with. For the Milcon program, again, as I stated earlier, we had three projects in FY12. We had none program in 13 and FY14. That information is unpublished. So we don't have anything to show you on that at this point. Moving down to midway of the slide, repair and maintenance, RME, which is a new title, we call it, from the previous year. We had none in 11. We did have an FY12 for NAVFAC Atlantic, 109 projects that ranged in a low threshold, $10,000. We had 2 or 3 that were in the $41 million range. Of those 109, I do not have a list of those in my slide presentation, but we wanted to give you an idea on that. And then lastly, MMRP, this is another new -E or little e that we refer to in our program, in our focus areas. And our first ones were in FY12. We had 16 projects for $30 million, and then in FY13, another 25 projects. I do have a list that follows of the FY13 program. All right, next slide, please. On slide 50, this is the Energy Conservation Investment Program. I'm not going to read this to the audience. The takeaway here is that if you look, this is the past. We do not have projects in every one of our FECs. In this particular slide here, we had 3 projects in Italy. We had 3 in the Navy Region Mid-Atlantic AOR. We had 2 in California. So some folks get lucky in a given year and some regions do not. And that's where we are. Do keep in mind that in the 12 program, we did have an increase in the dollar amount. We had some carryovers. And if we go to the next slide, please. Slide 51, again, I'm not going to read this, but we had 4 projects in Rapswa, a couple in Midland, 2 in the FEC Northwest, 2 in the Southeast. And if you go to the next slide, we had a slew of projects. Almost half of all of them were coming out of California. California is a good place for us because of the sun and geothermal and the wind. So a lot of eyes are in the Southwest region. Next slide, please. Slide 53. This particular slide here is utility energy savings contracts. We put this up here. I know that it's the 12 program. We don't have the 13, but at least we wanted to give an idea to those of you that are interested in what we have been doing as to where the work has taken place and what type of projects that we have. If I could go to the next slide, please. FY12, these are programmed MILCONs. I've mentioned them 2 or 3 times already. Again, we do not have any FY13s programmed, and FY14 is unpublished. Next slide. On slide 55, there are 2 slides here. We can just hold on this one. This is our MMRP. Most of these projects are less than $2 million. Some of them are as low as $130,000. This is part of our major maintenance and repair program that is paid for with our Navy working capital funds. And NAVFAC Mid-Atlantic and NAVFAC Northwest, and of course California, again, seems to get a lot of that. We do not have MMRP projects in every one of our regions. It's just the luck of the draw when they program those out. And again, we have the 13 program here to give you an idea as to what opportunities are out there. And then if we could go to the next slide. Slide number 56, 57, pardon me. I'll wait for a moment. One more slide? Okay. Slide 57. We cannot give you the list of projects for Energy SRM, SRME. This is the same slide I had last year if you want to know what we're up to. We spent a lot of time and effort on building optimization and recommissioning, retro commissioning. And then, of course, in the middle part, you see solar, solar, solar. And then lastly, the last grouping is just improvements or modifications to our existing buildings. Again, in the past, in FY12, we had projects that were less than 100,000. Commander Navy installations decided to make a threshold of having 100,000 as the minimum. We do not know yet what's going to come out of that, but there will be no more, quote, small projects, if I can use that terminology. One other thing that's not shown in this slide or in the presentation is because we do not manage it, is the Marine Corps also has an EIP, Energy Investment Program. They have up to 600 line items in the current FY12 year. It's their program, and we can't really talk about it, but we do execute it. So if you're out there looking around, the Marine Corps would be another place to look for projects for Energy Investment Program. And with that, I'll go to the next slide. Net zero installations. This slide's got a lot of information on it. I'm going to take a pause here and give everybody a chance to read it and kind of look at it, and then I'll talk about what's important for the audience here. In the first part, we talk about why we have to do this, and we received a grant from another part of our federal government, the Department of Energy. What they did is they refer to as phase 2 on the bottom. They talk about making assessments that they're working on it now, and it will be completed by the end of not fiscal year 12, but if you'll notice, I have CY, calendar year 12, and this is being done in concert with the Department of Energy. On the right, we can tell you where we're doing that. The installations are listed there. They're listed sort of kind of alphabetically, but I can tell you that California, Nevada has got a couple. We are showing for the audience here some projects that are not in the land AOR. There's 2 in Hawaii, and we've got a couple overseas in Cuba for Lant and Rota, Spain. What they are looking for when they're doing these installation studies are the areas they're specifically targeting are wind, solar, biomass, solar ventilation, preheating, and daylighting. Once all this comes out the chute, the question may come up, who's paying for this, where's it coming from? And I can tell you now that whatever the study leads to, it will end up being one of the types of projects you saw earlier. If you could go back like 4 slides, please. Maybe 5. It's the chart that shows keep going, more. There you go. So what will happen is whenever we finish the studies, all of these projects will end up in one of these 6 areas, and there's also an outside chance, which we really didn't discuss here today. There could be an enhanced use lease that could be an opportunity, and there also could be an energy joint venture or a power purchase agreement. But I'm here more to talk about brick and mortar projects where we're doing that. So if we can take it to the end, I have finished my slide deck, and we'll now go to questions. So my wingman, what you got for me? Anything yet?
Could you discuss SIR and ROI, what those are?
SIR is savings to investment ratio. If you could go back a slide, 2, a couple more. There you go. On the far right, you'll see the savings to investment ratios. Some of these are very high for MMRP. I'm just picking these out. They all have to meet a minimum requirement of 1 for any type of program that we have. As for the EROI is the little e for energy, return on investment. It's a program that was developed by Commander Navy Installations Command, and they have factors that are above and beyond the life cycle cost analysis. They look at 3 or 4 areas. They maximize financial benefits. The shore energy consumption, they want to minimize that. They provide reliable energy. They also rate how much impact it has on the number of sailors, like 0 to 100 or 100 to 1,000 or 1,000 to 10,000. They also rate impacts to how newsworthy it is. It's a very complex system, but that is what we do. The EROI is for Commander Navy Installations Command projects. It is not for Marine Corps projects. It's for Blue Navy only.
Where do we go, or who should we talk to find out more about Navy Energy?
Navy Energy. Could you repeat that question again?
Where do we go, or who should we talk to find out more about Navy Energy Technology?
Navy Energy Technology. Well, it's our lucky day because Mr. Gallagher, in his capital improvements business line presentation early on, talked about energy technology, where it goes through the chief engineer. What we can do is that when we answer these questions, we can give them information. We will give you a link as to where, if you have some ideas, to submit things that you want to sell to us or we might want to buy from you. That'll be it'll be a link through the NAVFAC public portal through the chief engineer office, and we will put that on there as an answer to the question. Anything else? Okay, I am finished for the moment, and I will now be turning over the presentation with a short intermission, very short, to Doug Lewis, who is our environmental product line manager. Thank
you. Good afternoon, everyone. I'm Doug Lewis, the environmental business line manager here at NAVFAC Atlantic. For those of you that logged in at noontime for Admiral Morton and are still with us, I appreciate you hanging tough to the end here with us. I have the last presentation of the NAVFAC Atlantic webinar today. I'm going to talk to you today a little bit about the products and services that we produce here within the environmental business line, and then I'm going to go over some of the contract solicitations that we anticipate over the next couple of years. I'll try to give you some information to the extent that I can on workload and that sort of thing. Next slide, please. This first slide here just gives you a list of the senior managers within the environmental business line here at NAVFAC Atlantic with some phone numbers. They were just updated this morning, some of the phone numbers, so if you happen to have printed this out before today, you might want to print it out again. But I encourage you, if you have questions that I'm unable to answer today, call myself or some of the other folks listed here in this org chart. Next slide. The first area I'm going to speak about today is our environmental compliance program. This program is intended and focused on keeping our installations in compliance with federal, state, local regulations. To do that, we do lots of different types of studies, plans, provide technical assistance to our Echelon 4 commands, etc. I've listed some of the medias that we get involved with, obviously the full gamut for regulatory compliance, water, wastewater, air, and so forth. But we do studies, we contract with folks like yourself in the local community, prepare documents for us that help us maintain compliance, or in cases where we're having difficulty maintaining compliance at a certain installation, we may tap into your particular expertise to help us determine, hey, where's the problem? What can we do to fix that problem so that we don't continue in that non-compliant stature? For the most part, as I'm looking at our environmental programs and the out-year budgets, they're pretty steady. Even though as you read the news and you hear all the TV and radio stuff, you're going to hear cut back, cut back, cut back. In this particular area, compliance, because our compliance is mandated by law, the budgets are set for us to remain compliant on a just-in-time basis. The compliance requirements are not going down, so the money related to compliance is most likely not going to be going down. Certainly, we're looking for efficiencies and ways to maintain compliance more effectively and for less cost. But generally speaking, we usually have about $130 million a year in this area for compliance efforts in the NAVFAC Atlantic AOR. So that includes the work we might do here at Lance itself and in any of our 7 components. Next slide. Okay, one of the second key areas within our environmental business line is environmental planning. And the NEPA documentation, the preparation of those documents, it's kind of twofold. We have our shore-based issues, primarily MILCON related, and then we have operational and fleet related exercises. All of those require NEPA documentation. Generally speaking, most of the MILCON work and those things that are NEPA or environmental planning related at an installation are done at one of our Echelon 4 commands, Southwest, Southeast, etc. We tend to do the range operations or the fleet exercises here at LANT, primarily because they cross a lot of the different geographic regions of our Echelon 4 commands. And also the Fleet Forces Command is located right down the street from us, and like to have the option to walk into our spaces or meet in our spaces on exercises that are critical to them. In this particular area of environmental planning, again, probably looking for somewhat steady funding, and we typically do in the neighborhood of $50 million a year across our AOR. So again, as I say, a lot of the bigger projects we do here out of LANT related to fleet work. Next slide. The next area within environmental business line I want to speak to is our restoration group. This is probably one of the more mature areas within the environmental business line. We've been doing cleanup work, as I call it, for many, many years, working on our former hazardous waste sites and more currently our munition sites. It's also the program with the largest funding stream. Typically, our earned funding runs in the neighborhood of $300 to $320 million a year. And so that, again, is split amongst our components primarily, but also some of the work is done here at LANT. The work on hazardous waste sites is winding down to some extent, and by winding down, I mean it's been going for 20 years, and so maybe we have 5 or more years to go. But the funding for that, as it begins to taper off, I should say the requirement for those funds taper off, it's ramping up in the area of munitions response. So right now we have a lot of work that we do here in Dacus munitions response, but there's a lot of other areas out there that we will be tackling over the next 20 years as the hazardous waste sites go down. In the munitions response, we're looking for a program that's typically around $50 million now, probably doubling that in the out years, and I'm talking about FY17 and beyond. We have a total requirement for what we call cost to complete for those sites, munitions response, of over $1 billion. So this is a program that has been consistently funded by Congress, and while everything I tell you is subject to them continuing to fund our programs, this is typically not something they're going to walk away from. We have a lot of regulatory agreements in place, so we should see continued funding for this program. Next slide. Just wanted to mention one group within the environmental business line here at LANT, our resources and assessment group. Many of you that have current contracts with us may have come in contact with the program managers in that group. We manage our clean and rack programs contracts out of that resources and assessment group. I call it EV4. The actual task orders for those contracts are managed by individual project managers, either at the FAC, one of the FACs, or here at LANT. But from a programmatic standpoint, both our clean and rack programs are managed out of our EV4 group. We also do some other assessment type work out of that group, and some of that is contracted, and the majority of that is coordination of in-house assets. Next slide, please. And our, what I call the EV5 group, the environmental conservation, we actually have quite a large number of different topics that get worked on within that group. Our applied biology, pest management support for our installations, and our FECs. We go out and there's a requirement to inspect every installation every 3 years. We do that here from Lant primarily. We have some similar resources at Southwest and at PAC. We also provide training in the pest management area for those that are responsible for applications at the installation level. Natural and cultural resources are another area that fall under the conservation product line here. And a lot of these types of studies and plans that we prepare support some of our environmental planning NEPA documents. So we may have requirements for cultural resource analysis that goes into a NEPA document, or likewise the natural resource analysis. So although this is a separate group here at Lant, it's often true that they're feeding into the environmental planning process. We have a large group of talented marine resource specialists here, some of the most highly technical people in Lant Environmental, whose focus is primarily in the training, ops training for fleets. But again, they deliver a lot of specific documentation into our environmental planning process. In this area of conservation, our budget usually runs in the neighborhood of about $50 million a year. Again, that's across the NAVFAC Atlantic AOR. Next slide, please. Okay, I've touched on the different areas where we work within environmental. Now I'm going to talk a little bit about our acquisition strategy. For those of you that were on earlier, you had heard Patty talk about a fair amount of this, but in case you weren't here, or we want to reiterate some of this. She noted that each business line works an acquisition strategy in conjunction with the acquisition department here, and we've done that very same thing. We recently completed our FY13 through FY15 acquisition strategy. Some of the goals of that strategy is to centralize larger contracts here at Lant. Our racks and our clean contracts typically have been here before, with the exception of Southwest. Our Echelon 4 there has their own rack contracts. We also have centralized range clearance contracts in some of our multimedia contracts, as well as NEPA and TAP contracts. Again, the purpose there is because we have the technical capability here that we can't afford to necessarily have at all of our Echelon 4 locations. The larger contracts, more centralized, we get our partners like yourself on board with a unique technical competency that, again, maybe not as many contractors would have if we went with smaller contracts in multiple locations. It's also more efficient both for our contracting community and for you in terms of having fewer solicitations to prepare responses to. We do still have contracts at our Echelon 4s. Already mentioned Southwest has some rack contracts out there. Generally, the Echelon 4 contracts are smaller in nature, either single media in some cases, or smaller restoration contracts where we're using small business. There may also be some regional requirements that are unique to a particular region. Southwest comes to mind, but each and every region has some specialized requirements, and so they may have some contracts to deal with some of those specialized things. As we put the toolbox together, as Patty mentioned, we try to have a mixture to allow us the most flexibility, fixed price, multiple award, small business. Actually, in our most recent acquisition strategy now, we're looking at roughly about 50% of the small business, of our contracts will be small business over the next 3 years. Next slide, please. Okay, the next several slides are eye charts for all of you and for me as well. But I wanted to point out a couple things about them. First of all of the information in here is subject to some change in terms of either the strategy or the timing or even the amount. What you're seeing here on this slide and the ones that follow is the best available information that we gathered earlier this year in the last couple of months as we were putting our acquisition strategy together. So you may see some of these same contracts during the FEC briefings that are following later this week. They may be showing you some of the same information. Some of you may have some specific questions about the dates as to when you'll see the RFPs on the street or the value. And so if you send those in to us, I'm not going to answer unique contract by contract questions here today, but we'll do the research necessary, including going back to our FAQs if necessary, and provide the written comments as we're going to do with all the questions that come in for the webinar. Next slide, please. I wanted to mention this one for just a little bit longer because in the middle of this slide are the contracts that we are handling here at NAVFAC Atlantic. As has been mentioned, we typically have we centralize the bigger contracts here. So you'll see RAC contract, the multimedia compliance contracts, and then some of our range clearance, range maintenance type of contracts. I mentioned that munitions response was a growing area and would be FY 16, 17 and out. So you'll see a couple of contracts on here for 13, 14, 15 time frame of some pretty substantial size. That's as we do our analysis of what types of contracts we'll need to have in place for that future work. This is part of our acquisition planning. So those are considered growth areas within the environmental business line. Next slide, please. On this slide, I just wanted to mention, as I'm looking at the Mid-Lant contract solicitations in the middle of the contract, that we have a preponderance of fixed price contracts. That's one of the other things that we're moving more towards over time is less reliance on cost plus and a greater percentage of our contracts being fixed price. You'll also see in that particular Mid-Lant list that majority of the work that they're showing there is for small business. That's going to be pretty common at all of our Echelon 4 commands like Mid-Lant. As I mentioned earlier, they typically have the smaller contracts with regional requirements, and small business is usually more appropriate for those. Next slide, please. And then finally, here, this is the Southwest list. I already mentioned earlier that even though the other Echelon 4 commands are using the centralized RAC contracts that we have here at LANT, Southwest does have their own RAC contracts and some other fairly large contracts. That's based primarily on the large workload they have there in that particular region, and the fact that they had a lot of BRAC work to do as well. Next slide. Okay, Karen Wilson's here with me and got some questions.
We have one question. Will you update the forecast for contract solicitation that is posted on the public website?
Yes, absolutely, certainly. And I think, as I mentioned earlier, some of what's in the slides you see today is perhaps a little bit dated because we got information from the FAQs in the last 2 months. But yes, we will update the information on the portal. Okay, I wanted to mention again that all of the questions that have been submitted, not just for environmental, but for any of the business lines or support lines, will be answered on the website. I'm not sure the exact timing on that, but in the near term. Since I had the pleasure of doing the last briefing today, I'll close it for NAVFAC Atlantic. Thank you for participating. As Admiral Morton noted at the beginning, we're doing this forum this year in a different manner through the webinar. We hope that you'll find that this has been useful for you. We encourage you that have been participating today to take the survey. The link there is on the slide. It will be very helpful for us to get your feedback on what you thought of this webinar and how it compares in your view to the forum that we had at the Virginia Beach Convention Center in past years. We have recorded the webinar today, so if you have some colleagues that you want to share this with at a later date, it will also be posted on the website eventually, and you'll have access to it. Thank you for joining us. The next webinar is tomorrow at noon Eastern Time. It will be NAVFAC, your app swap. Thank you again.